Okay, so after making a post about it, I figured I should try and at least make a short video about some of the things I want to talk about. Um, First, I want to start by saying that I don't hold particular qualifications in anything other than telecommunications. I'm not claiming to be a subject matter expert on anything I discuss. These are just thoughts I've had and from things I've heard and read and things I've put together. If anything I say is untrue, please feel free to let me know. I actually don't mind being corrected as long as there's evidence for that correction, because I don't like having the wrong information, and I don't understand why people would want the wrong information. So if anything I'm saying has been proven wrong or is out of date, please update me. Um, Also, nothing I say is to belittle, discriminate, offend, or bring anyone down. These are just observations I've made, and they are, and talking about them is designed or intended, at least, to try and get people thinking from other people's point of views sometimes, and to try and consider the situation as a whole, um, rather than only from a particular viewpoint, or without without at least attempting to understand the other person's point of view or the reasons why they may think differently to yourself. Um, I also want to say nothing I ever say is intended to minimize or belittle anyone's struggles. I've had my fair share, and I understand what it's like, and I understand that it can be very difficult to hear someone say that what you think is happening may not be happening, or there may be reasons for the horrible things that people have done to you or your um, peers. So, and that, and also, none of this is to excuse any behaviours. It is, if I ever talk about the reasons why people may have done something, it's not trying to give them an excuse for what they did, or to mitigate their responsibility for the harm that's been done. It's to perhaps give people an understanding, or an understanding of why things may have been done the way they were. Um, yeah. So I apologise in advance if I use any language or terminology that people find offensive. I do try not to, but um, you know, it is hard to undo almost 40 years of linguistic patterns, and mistakes may be made, and they're not intended to be. Once again, they're not intended to be offensive. I may use certain terminology. I use terminology to try and be precise and not overly cumbersome. Once again, linguistically cumbersome with things. Not to, once again, not to try and offend or to, make anyone feel uncomfortable. Also, when I make more specific videos, I'll try and put trigger warnings or whatever on them, so that if something is something that you either that is either too raw, or you're not ready to to maybe hear about why the things that happened may have happened, and once again may have happened, because these are once again only my interpretations of events and theories, I guess, or hypotheses on some of the reasons why things are done or could be done or may have happened, and whatnot. So yeah, this is just about me getting the thoughts that run around my head crazy and keep me up at nights out, and maybe find someone to discuss them with, because I like sharing information and I like having information shared. I am interested in almost everything, and what I am particularly interested in is hearing people talk about their passions and their interests and their thoughts. And when we can have an open, mature, and non-confrontational conversation about these issues and these things, quite often it's a good way for people to learn things that they may not have considered, or just find out new information, because information is cool. I like knowing things, and I like knowing the right things, and I like knowing how different things affect different people, so that I can try and not make anyone's life harder than it has to be, and so that sometimes it helps me find an understanding or have an epiphany on my own issues. So it's all meant to be very positive, as much as some things can be painful to talk about. Sometimes the only way out is through, in difficult situations, and sometimes you need to confront painful memories or painful experiences to be able to move past them. At least I found that. And also I found that the more I understand about why things have been done, or why things are done, or how the brain works, and how people respond to trauma, particularly how I respond to trauma, and how my brain works, it helps me understand and overcome some of the challenges I've faced. So now that I've got that sort of disclaimer out of the way, I want to... I just maybe should start this by talking a little bit about myself. Without going too much into detail, I'm 39. I'm quite a large person. I'm 196 centimeters at 6'5". For you Americans and anyone else who uses feet and inches, about 115 kilos, 120 kilos, depending on the day, how much water I've drunk. So that's what, 260, 265-ish pounds. I have ADHD, diagnosed as a child, re-diagnosed as an adult. I have PTSD from my time in the army, depression, anxiety, and all the fun things that are linked with that, and chronic pain from a lot of injuries. So my life hasn't been the easiest, but I try not to let these things hold me back. There are things that I can't do, or that I struggle with, that I wish I could do, but some things you need to either do the rehab and recovery from before you can do them again. Before you can do them again, some things, sometimes part of overcoming your limitations is learning what ones can be overcome and what ones can't, and accepting that. I'm not religious at all, but there's I believe it's a Serenity Prayer or whatever it's called from the Alcoholics Anonymous. I think one of the lines is, give me the strength to overcome the things I can change, to change the things I can. Hang on, I'll look it up. Okay, paused it, Googled it. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So that's a pretty good thing to have. It's basically knowing yourself, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses. Self-awareness is one of the most important things that you can have. It almost goes back to the old saying, the first step to solve a problem is admitting that it exists. And I guess that's one of the first things I want to talk about is there's a big movement towards positivity about yourself. And to a certain extent, this is a good thing. And people talk about neurodiversities, particularly ADHD, as a superpower. And in a way it is, and in a way it's not. I think it's important to acknowledge it is very important to acknowledge and understand the strengths of having a neurodiverse mind, because it's not necessarily worse, it's not necessarily better, but there are things that people with neurodiversities are better at, and there's things that we're not as good at as neurotypicals. And a lot of people want to focus on the positive, and I understand that thinking. But if you only focus on the positive and you don't admit the weaknesses to yourself, that's a pitfall that you can fall into. By understanding your weaknesses, you can understand how to overcome them. So, for example, people with ADHD, we have a fast mind, is one of the simplest ways of putting it, but it's a lot more than that. There is the fast mind, there is the ability to creatively problem solve, to form connections between things, and at a speed that a lot of neurotypicals just cannot comprehend or cannot keep up with. But there's also things such as the executive function difficulties, mood regulation, difficulties, all sorts of other things, the inner critic that comes with it that you need to understand to be able to help ignore or even use. So it's great to focus on your strengths, but if you don't acknowledge your weaknesses and don't learn to overcome them, I find it is much more difficult to move forwards and to function when you don't understand why you can't do things, or why you have difficulty with things that should be easy. And that is a massive struggle that I've had with everything, because there's also a huge interaction and correlation between ADHD and trauma, or ADHD and trauma disorders such as PTSD, and the two conditions can exacerbate each other. Like for example, if you have trauma and you are triggered, the people often disparage the term trigger, but all it simply means is an event has happened that has reminded you of your traumatic event and is bringing up symptoms. With the associative thinking of an ADHD brain, not only can a trigger bring up a traumatic event, or if you have CPTSD or multiple traumatic incidences throughout your life, you can bring up all of them and everything else that was sort of like that, and every other time that you were treated poorly that was similar to that. And these memories can just fire at you at 100 miles an hour, and it becomes very overwhelming and can cause panic attacks, breakdowns, flashbacks that are worse than, or can be more severe or more easily triggered than patients without ADHD. And there has been a lot of studies being done and information coming about now where a lot of cases of particularly treatment-resistant PTSD because the person has an undiagnosed neurodiversity. And so by trying to address the trauma in isolation and without being aware of or taking into account the interactions between the trauma and the ADHD autism or whatever other neurodiversity you happen to have, you're trying to basically, you're only trying to treat half the problem, and you're trying to treat it as if the person had a neurotypical brain. And a neurotypical brain and an ADHD or neurodivergent brain, they work differently. Thought processes work differently, the neurochemistry is different, so even the medications interact differently. Like, for example, you give someone without ADHD stimulant medication, stimulant ADHD medication, and it can make them quite speedy. People take it to get high. But if you give it to someone with ADHD and it's within the dosage guidelines or within the appropriate dosage for that person, it can actually slow them down. And so things work differently with the different brain chemistries. Nothing I'm trying to say makes anyone better or worse. It's just, it's hard to solve a problem when you don't understand the whole problem. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is comes down to people not understanding the whole problem, or not being willing to understand the whole problem, or being unwilling to admit that anyone else could understand what they're going through. And this is a problem that I've had in the past, particularly before I became aware of these situations and the way trauma works. And I've known a lot of people with, and read about a lot of people with, and one of the biggest problems that particularly people with trauma or who have had difficulties or are discriminated against for whatever the reason may be, is while everyone's history and trauma may be unique, the way the brain responds to that trauma is the same, basically. As I said, things like neurodiversities and different brain chemistries and things can affect it. But the body and the brain can't tell the difference between a physical or psychological or emotional threat, and the threat response functions the same way. Another thing I want to talk about is, at some stage at least, is what happens once that threat response kicks in and what it does to your brain, and how it changes how you respond, how you react, and how that response can actually be responsible for other people's trauma. So, and that's a difficult one to get into because it can be quite upsetting, particularly because the explanation can appear to be justifying some heinous and horrible actions. And as I said earlier, not trying to justify these actions, not trying to excuse these actions. Just trying to give an understanding of how and why some of them happen. And yeah. So I guess that's the start of it. And I want to talk about so many topics, and I've written a quick list about what I want to talk about. But one of the issues I have with talking about these thoughts I have and these ideas I have that I want to share is that I go off on tangents. That's another ADHD tendency, and it's due to that associative memory I was talking about before, and that associative thinking. So you start talking about one subject and it branches off into another one, and then you often forget what you were talking about in the first place, or you go off on such a tangent and then you go, hang on, we were talking about something completely different, because I bounced through about 6 different topics before I've done that. So I will do my best to try and stay on track with these videos as I make them. I'm also going to start posting some videos about other things I'm doing, such as things I make, things I do, because apparently I do and make some interesting things. For example, I like to build things. And me building things and repairing things and fixing things came about from, for most of my life, not having a lot of money. So if I wanted something, I often couldn't afford to get someone else to make it for me, or to buy it. So if I could figure out how to make it, I would. And it wasn't until I think I was sort of towards the end of my time in the army, and it was some of the attitudes I learnt being a technician in the army that led me to try and fix things and try and make things myself. And I found that since I've been willing to try new skills, I've been able to pick up quite a lot of them. There's ones that I absolutely struggle with, and with the practice I have gotten better, but I will probably never be good at. And that's a limitation, and everyone has limitations, and that's something that people sometimes struggle to accept about themselves. And part of that is, another thing I want to talk about is people's upbringings and the problems that can be caused by overly positive messaging in things. And one of the big ones of those is that anyone can be anything. No. Not everyone can be everything. Not everyone can do everything. At least not everyone can do everything well. And some people, try as they might, may never succeed at things. And I'm not saying this to be disheartening. I'm saying this because it is a very realistic thing that people need to learn sometimes. And by accepting your limitations, you can manage your expectations. So I always encourage people to try new things. People to have the courage to step up and go, I want to try and do that. I want to try and do this. One of the things I would love to be able to do is draw, or paint, or make art. I can picture things that I want to draw, that I want to make, that I want to sculpt, or whatever you want to call it, in my head. But I have a massively hard time drawing them, actually getting them down on paper, making the shapes that I want to make happen. Hang on a second, this is nothing I want you to look up. I'll just pause. Okay, this is one of the things I will be doing. I'll try and be prepared and have checked these things beforehand, but as I said, random thoughts sometimes, and won't always be the most prepared. Dysgraphia is the term for it. It's similar to dyslexia, but it's sort of the other way around, where dyslexia is a difficulty interpreting things that you see. Dysgraphia is basically the opposite. The things you can visualize and picture in your mind, it's having trouble expressing it. And there's different forms of it, apparently: motor, spatial, and dyslexic dysgraphia, which is motor affects people's fine motor skills, making it difficult to write and draw. Spatial dysgraphia is making it hard to perceive spatial relationships, which I don't think I have, because I can build things. I just struggle to make the shapes, but if I had the shapes, I can put them together quite well. And dyslexic dysgraphia affects a person's ability to write spontaneously, making it difficult to write and draw. So, for example, I have always had horrible handwriting. I have made many, many attempts to improve that handwriting, and it has gotten better, but it's still very bad. I tend to write in block letters now, so all caps, because it makes it legible, because there have been many times where I have written things down and I can't even read it myself. And that sucks, particularly when I wrote quickly. Made school very hard. But that is one of my limitations, and by understanding and accepting that limitation, I can then still do some of the things I want to do. I can still be creative. I can still express some of my ideas, not all, but some of them, by using different mediums. Like, for example, I'm quite good with colors, and so I can paint miniatures, and I've gotten quite decent at that with practice. But while I can picture a miniature, if I wanted to sculpt one, I could picture it. But I could, if I tried to sculpt it, the proportions would be off, the lines would be wrong. It's just a thing. And when I'm designing things that I want to build, I'll use a CAD program. If I can, or before I figured out how to do that, I'd use other drawing programs that drew the shapes for me. Because, as I said before, if I had the shapes, I can put them together. But I can't make the shapes very well. So this is a good example of understanding your limitations so that therefore you can overcome them. It's not accepting your limitations would almost be like, and I'm once again not trying to be offensive here, a paraplegic person not accepting that they can't control their legs and therefore going, I should be able to run 100 meters like everyone else, instead of going, okay, because I can't use my legs, and I'm most likely generalizing paraplegia. Once again, not trying to be exclusionary, just trying to use it as an example that would more easily be understood by a wider audience. So, instead of being able to run the 100 meters, I will use this racing wheelchair to be able to get down to the far end quickly as well. So I can still achieve my goal of being an athletic person and being quick to cover this distance. I just have to do it a different way because of my limitation. And this, even once you've accepted your own limitations, it can be very frustrating when other people can't or won't understand them or make the effort to understand them, and when you try and explain them, you're just shut down or told, but it's simple, or you should be able to do this, or you just need to try harder. And that can be very frustrating, and that can lead to all sorts of traumas and behavioral issues and mental health complications. Another thing that is very important to me is that, other than for explanation purposes, I really dislike when people treat mental and physical health as two separate things, because they are not separate. They are very intrinsically linked and do affect each other, both positively and negatively. For example, it's almost common knowledge these days that working out and being active and, lifting heavy things or running or whatever it is you do to be active can really assist with mental health. But also mental health, particularly if you're a chronic pain sufferer, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're having a bad day, you hurt more. And this is because, people like to say, oh, but it's all in your head. Everything is all in our head. Pain, physical pain, is all in your head, because we are a brain driving a meat ship, basically. We're driving a meat robot, that we control through a nervous system. We are our thoughts. I think, therefore I am, that sort of stuff. And so therefore, everything you experience, everything you have ever done, everything you have ever felt has all been in your head, because everything is in your head. Yeah? Okay. So, once again, that is not, when I say that, I'm not dismissing anything, because every experience we have is in our head. But people also really struggle with the concept that some people can't do the things you can, and there are things that people can't do, or that people find extremely difficult that you find extremely easy. I mean, that can happen if you're more intelligent than someone. You can understand a concept or solve a problem that other people just can't, or that it takes them a long time or it's extremely difficult for them. It's like, once again, it's people not being able. One of the biggest one of the biggest problems that I believe we have as humans is the inability to accept that people can and can't do things that we can and can't do, or accept that people have different thought processes than our own. There was a great quote, I looked it up earlier, by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it says the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. So that's one way of putting it, but my interpretation, at least, of what he's saying is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to try and think from a viewpoint different from your own. Basically saying, if I thought this way, if I believed the things that this person believes, if I had the disabilities or the abilities that this person had, can I try and understand how they could arrive at a certain point or a certain viewpoint or a certain action? And that can be very difficult, because there's all sorts of factors stopping that. Once again, trauma, pain, fight or flight response, and these things suck. Okay, so see, this is one of the tangents I was talking about. Intelligence is another thing I want to talk about, and as I'll elaborate a little bit, because I'm going to, as I mentioned before, I try and use terms precisely. If I'm going to use that term precisely, I will try and explain what I mean by it. By intelligence, I mean mental processing power. I'm not talking about memory, education, wisdom, common sense. I'm talking about your pure ability to basically crunch the numbers, to do the math, to absorb and comprehend, or at least comprehend information that is provided, and use that information to, and by that understanding, either expand upon or link that thinking to other information that you have, and also to be able to run new information through an internal system of checks and balances and come up with a furthered idea of how things are. And that last thing is not necessarily a quality of intelligence per se, but it's just a good thing to be able to do. I guess it helps further your knowledge and intelligence. Once again, intelligence and knowledge are two different things. And a lot of people mistake what intelligence is, and mistake education with intelligence, and the ability to regurgitate information with understanding that information. So that is one thing I would like to talk about, and it's a good example of when I'm using a definitive term rather than trying to label anything. It's like if I ever talk about biological sex as opposed to gender, and yes, I'm aware of intersex conditions and whatnot, and they each had their own individual correct name. I'm not going to go through a list of them now. I might go through a list of them when I talk about this issue, but if I ever say the term male, I'm talking about someone with an X and a Y chromosome that doesn't have any other conditions that may stop them from presenting and physically being a male of the human species. I'm not saying they're a man, a boy, a guy, a woman, a girl, whatever. That is gender. And when I use the term gender and biological sex, or these terms, I'm talking about different things. And if I use the term female, I'm talking about someone with an 2X chromosomes and no other conditions that will affect the way they appear. Because yes, I'm aware that you can have those chromosomes and then still appear differently due to other factors. So it's the, I guess it's the majorative term for that thing. It's not meant to judge or isolate or anything other than for pure physical, biological differences, or simplification of the linguistics of not having, say, XX and XY, or XX but without this, or XY without this. And and I myself, for most of my life, was under the impression that I may have what is considered an intersex disorder, XYY, Klinefelter's or supermale syndrome. It's also known as. It turns out that I don't. I just have a bunch of the indicators for it due to other factors, but it was significant enough that I underwent the testing for it for diagnostic purposes, and to try and understand and to find the root causes for some of the mental health and physical health issues I have. And I only found out that I didn't have it because all the a majority of signs said it was a high probability when I was 37. And we thought I was likely to have it since the age of 16. So while I do not have that, it turns out, one of the reasons we didn't test for it earlier was how much genetic testing cost, and it's now much cheaper and can be done. While it turns out I do not have it, I do understand and have an awareness of these conditions and what they can do, and what it's like to not be what people think you are, or not be what you appear to be. Sorry, another tangent. So some of the things I would like to talk about are neurodiversity and trauma and their interactions. I can deep dive into that. One thing that I find fascinating is the morality of information and tools, or knowledge and tools, because they are neither good nor evil. It's about how you use them. But that's something we can talk about for a long time as well. Discrimination in minorities and the things that have led to more understanding and can actually prevent further understanding and further progress. People's ethics, ideals, and how they develop. Intelligence. There's a really interesting concept called the zone beta paradox I want to go into. Technological advancement, some of the things that are happening, some of the things that aren't happening, and some of the things that are holding us back from doing things that we could be doing. There was another one I just thought of. Sorry, I'm also going to try not to swear. Discrimination, minorities, people's ethics, ideas, and how they develop. Politics, and there's a thing called monolithic thinking that is actually quite harmful, and on both sides. Also, my opinions at least, on the problems with identifying as left-wing, right-wing, single-issue voting, lobbyists, democracy, any of these things. Lots of these things. Nothing's a perfect system, and because nothing's a perfect system, you'll always find the people who will exploit the system, and often the people in positions of power are not necessarily the people who are the best fit for the job, but they're in positions of power because they like having power. This happens with organisations as small as clubs and as big as countries, the UN, the world, all of it. So it's an interesting subject. There's lots of other interesting subjects. Fighting. I love fight sports. I think the reason I love fight sports so much is because it's one of the few times that I'm in the moment and out of my head. Out of my head is in the term, because I just said that everything's in your head. But I'm in the moment, and also the people I've met in fight sports, in particularly Boha and LARPing, funnily enough. Even though, reenactment's another thing I'll talk about, and how people really need to stop bagging on other forms of reenactment. We're all a bunch of nerds who like to hit each other with swords or sword-like objects, or pretend to be, if you're not into medieval or ancient reenactment, maybe you're a Civil War or Vietnam War reenactor. We like to pretend to be things we're not. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's great fun. And it all leads into each other anyway. So we need to stop. And it's a niche enough thing that we really need to stop. People really need to stop picking on each other and share the joy of this thing that we all enjoy. And we just do it different ways. Crap, I forgot what I was talking about again. Fighting. That's what I was talking about. And what I like about it, what I don't like about it, Boha, and why I think it's one of the best things I've ever done, and the community around it, and why I think it's one of the best communities out there. And a lot of that's trial through adversity. And another thing with fight sports that I love, that I'll quickly cover off, is the concept of talk, I'll say crap, get hit. You know what I'm trying to say, is a big part of it. In a fight sport in particular, it's very hard to talk yourself up when you can't back it up. And you have a disagreement with someone, you can often leave it on the mat or in the ring or in the list, whatever it is you do. But I have also found some of the nicest, most genuine people I have ever met in these sports. Another thing I will talk about, and it sort of comes into the discrimination minorities and things, it's my ideas on gender, and particularly what it means, to me at least, to be a man and to identify as a man. Not a boy, not a guy, not a girl, a lady, not a male, but a man, capital M. Sorry, I drew an N. So, these are some things I want to talk about. If you're interested, follow me. Some things I talk about will be interesting, some things I won't. Sometimes I'll just ramble on and end up on tangents and probably delete the video. So I think it will be good for me to get these thoughts out of my head, and hopefully this will spark some interesting conversations. If anything I say, once again I'll state, if anything I ever say is offensive or incorrect, or you think it's incorrect, please feel free to leave a comment, and particularly if you can leave a comment with a link to contrary information to what I've said, that will be fantastic. That would be fantastic, because if I'm wrong, I want to know that I'm wrong so that I can then be right. And if I'm being offensive and I'm not aware of it, I want to know so that I can at least attempt not to cause any more offense, because I don't want to cause. I have tried to make it one of my core values in life not to cause other people harm. One way I put it in fight sports is, because it's a fight sport, I'm perfectly okay with hurting someone, I just don't want to injure them. And so I don't want to cause harm. It's a fight sport, you're going to get hit in the face, it's going to hurt. That's part of the game, or you'll get thrown on the ground and it can hurt, or you'll get in a hold and have to tap. Pain is part of the deal, and people accept that going in. What I don't like doing is breaking people or injuring people, causing pain that doesn't stop once the fight's over, or at least by the end of the day, if it's a really good one. So, yeah, these are things I'm interested in. If you're interested, follow me. If you're not, don't. If you want to talk about something, feel free. I will ask, tangents again, I will ask people not to argue or fight in the comments. If someone's just being unpleasant, I'll probably just delete them or block them or whatever it is I can do. Because this isn't about unpleasantness, this is about understanding. If someone, as I said, if someone has contrary information, please feel free to post it, link it. Please make it from the most reliable sources you can get. One of the great things about the internet is that we have access to all the world's information in the palm of our hand. One of the bad things about the internet is that means we also have access to all of the incorrect information and the bigoted, out-of-date information in the palm of our hand as well. And it's sometimes difficult to separate the fact from the fiction, I guess. So yeah, if someone posts something contrary to what I've said, please don't argue with them. If you have information that is counter to theirs or elaborates on theirs, please provide it, link it, anything. I always like more information, and I doubt that I'll have so many followers or comments that I can't keep up. If I do miss something or don't comment on something, please don't be offended. It's not that I am not interested, it's that there is something, either I've missed it because I spaced, or something's happened in my life that has taken priority over these videos and commenting on them, or I'm asleep. Who knows? It could be anything, but it's never malice. It's never intentional neglect. And yeah. Other things I'll post, workout updates, things I'm building, projects I've got coming up, just stuff about my life that people may or may not find interesting. I'll try and make different playlists so people can follow the stuff they're interested in and not have to, if they want to see the stuff I build but not hear me ramble on about the random thoughts in my head for however long these videos end up being, that's fine. If they're interested in medieval stuff but not the farm stuff, if they want to see the videos I might take of my animals but don't care about anything else, that's cool. So I'll try and make playlists. I'll try and title them differently. If I get enough of these things, I might even start different channels for them. So yeah, it's just me finding an outlet for myself, dealing with and trying to deal with my own challenges and help other people with this. Anyway, guys, if you've made it this far, you are probably interested and can put up with my rambling, tangential thoughts. So thank you for that. And if you ever want to talk, need to talk, please feel free to reach out and contact me, and I will attempt at least to reply. Anyway, have a good day, night, whatever it is, and be nice to each other. It's all it really comes down to. See you later.